Given the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a great impact to the whole world. It not only affects the lifestyle of many people, but also to the teaching to the children. Many schools have been suspended, and we start using online platforms such as Google Meets, Zoom, and other online platforms to teach our children. We start facing new teaching challenges and entering a new teaching world. After shifting towards online teaching, once an English teacher, who is my colleague, complained about the low effectiveness of online teaching and told me about her greater use of L1 in her English classes. This inspired me in examining any possible change on Hong Kong English teachers' attitudes on using L1 in their English teaching in local primary school context after the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. So that's why I conduct this research to investigate deeply into their attitudes and usage, and also any possible change on their attitudes and usage. In this video, I invited 3 teachers to share their opinions with us. Let's hear what they say. Before the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, did you agree that Cantonese, that means our mother tongue, should be used in teaching English at primary level?
I would agree to a certain extent that we should use Cantonese in our teaching, because sometimes it is very difficult for the second language learner, meaning our kids, our students, to make sense of the complicated English grammar structure, because given we actually focus on teaching English grammar very heavily in our teaching, so sometimes we would use a bit of Cantonese to explain a little bit about the structure, and for me personally, I sometimes also use Cantonese to explain about some very important homework they have to do during the holiday or before or after the exam. So just to give them a more clear picture of what they are going to do or going to learn, I would suggest using a bit of Cantonese to better explain what they are going to do and learn.
Before the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, I partly agree that Cantonese should be used in teaching English at primary level. The necessity of using Cantonese as a teaching aid actually depends on the ability of students. For some students who have special learning needs or particularly weak in learning English as a second language, I think Cantonese is quite essential for them to understand important grammar concepts or to construct ideas when doing writing. Some students even may rely on their mother language to finish their daily classwork or homework. So I think students may express what they need, or they may ask questions with a more familiar language. But however, for some elementary primary level students, I think Cantonese should not be overused in lessons, because this will actually encourage students to learn second language with their mother tongue.
I totally agree that Cantonese should be used in teaching English at primary level, as it is very convenient and we can assure everyone that understood what the teacher says, especially when they are explaining the vocabulary and some very ambiguous and vague concepts and terms. And also when we are before the outbreak and we have face-to-face lesson, we can also ensure that students actually know what the teacher wants the students to do when they are conducting some activities in the classroom.
How often did you use Cantonese in one single lesson? Or in what context did you usually use L1 in teaching English before the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic?
Most of the time when I use Cantonese, it will be times where I have to explain about some important homework they have to do during the holiday or before or after the exams or tests. Okay, and sometimes I also use Cantonese to explain some maybe a little bit complicated English grammar structure because it's very hard for them to make sense of the English structure when they don't know a lot about English. So I would try to use mother tongue to scaffold them in learning English in a better way.
Generally, Cantonese is rarely used in my English lessons, but sometimes I do use Cantonese to call students' names to arouse students' attention in class. And also, I may borrow students' mouth to rephrase my words in Cantonese. Actually, it is to tell those who are weaker students to understand what I was trying to say. And sometimes I will ask some stronger students to tell the meaning of difficult words in Cantonese too.
Using English to teach English is our school policy, so I rarely use Cantonese to teach English, to be honest. And say I only use maybe 10% time or for the whole week that I would use L1 to teach English. Okay, especially when I need to explain some difficult terms or explain some concepts or something that students do not have a chance to experience. I might need to use L1 to explain a bit.
So after the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a shift towards online teaching, so usually we use Zoom to teach our lessons. Can you describe if you have changed your attitude on using L1 in teaching English at primary level after the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, and how? Can you describe some of your opinions?
Personally, I would insist on using English as much as I can in my lesson. But given the situation where we rely heavily on Zoom teaching right now, many students can be very inattentive during their lessons. So in that case, I might use maybe a little bit of Cantonese to kind of recapture their attention, because when they hear mother tongue, they will be slightly more attentive than hearing English, because after all, most of the students, when we're talking about local students, they tend to be like relatively less attentive during English lesson because they cannot understand a lot about the language. So when they hear their mother tongue, they will be slightly more attentive. So yeah, that will be my major reason of using Cantonese, which is to capture their attention. And the rest, I guess it's also the same. Sometimes I also use Cantonese to explain about homework and some complicated grammar structure.
After Zoom is adopted as our teaching platform, I partly agree that using the first language can actually help teachers to achieve their teaching progress or objective as a tool of classroom management. Since the teaching time and schedule is really much intense when comparing to face-to-face teaching, I think teachers have to squeeze the time in teaching and also to shorten the time in explaining classwork or homework in a period of like 20 to 25 minutes. And teachers also have to manage different functions of the computer, like switching from ebooks to PowerPoints or some other learning tools. And this actually is quite time consuming during the teaching periods. So I think Cantonese can function as an audio aid to let students to be more focused. It can address students' attention and let students understand some complicated instructions too. Like for example, when we need to have some dictations, we need to ask students to write in particular formats during those dictation or writing tasks. So Cantonese can help in this way. So after the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, I have been using more Cantonese in my teaching periods than before. And actually, I think using more Cantonese in my lessons can be quite useful for students to understand what I'm going to teach and to achieve the teaching objectives.
I totally understand that using L1 to teach English is not a bad thing. When I started learning how to teach English, actually after the outbreak of COVID-19, I spent even more time to use L1 to teach English, as the teaching time has been cut from 40 minutes of the lesson time to now only 25 minutes. So I think there's a very great cut at the teaching time. It will be a lot helpful that if I use L1 to explain and teach everything. So I actually really spend more than 5 minutes to use L1 to teach English. And also I think the good side is I can make sure everyone understood what I have said during the lesson, and students can give me timely responses to what I actually gave. Okay, for example, I gave some instruction or I asked them to do something by using their phone. I can actually get a lot of questions if I teach in Cantonese, and so I think the change is very straightforward and very friendly, because some students actually are afraid of using or listening to what teacher have said in English. So what I have experienced is a very friendly and very convenient strategy to use L1 to teach English.
So after having the interviews with the interviewees, we can see that before the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, all interviewees endorsed the effectiveness of employing a little bit of Cantonese in English teaching in the face-to-face lessons. And they think that Cantonese is mainly useful in the following four contexts, comprising the explaining grammar concepts, teaching vocabulary, giving instructions, and helping students to construct ideas in the writing activities. The second question is about the usage of L1 in English teaching before the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. All interviewees said that they mostly use English in the lesson, and they rarely use Cantonese in a face-to-face lesson in their English teaching. And they mostly use a little bit of Cantonese for grammar teaching, vocabulary teaching, and using it to arouse students' attention. One of the interviewees even pointed out that there is a limitation and restriction for them that constricts their use of L1, which is the school policy. As the school policy restricts and requires the teachers to use 100% of English to teach English. So this is one of the main concerns for the teachers and restrict their use of L1 in the face-to-face lessons. The third question is about the change of attitudes and usage of L1 after the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. Surprisingly, all interviewees reported that more Cantonese is used in online lessons. Although they still use a small proportion of Cantonese inside the English lessons, but they use relatively more Cantonese than before. They mainly use Cantonese in the following 4 ways, including giving instructions, managing the classroom, ensuring students' understanding, and also achieving teaching progress and objectives. And through the interviews, the main reason found for this change of attitude and usage is mainly because of the shortened teaching time and also the less attentiveness of the students. This is the end of the video. Hope you enjoy my sharing. Special thanks to all the interviewees. So there will be more data and analysis in my capstone project. So please look forward to that. Thank you.